There must have been some consternation in the Northeast United States, at least among rabid football fans, when their beloved Patriots selected Mac Jones as the heir apparent to the legendary but now departed Tom Brady. Granted, Jones was a Heisman finalist and won college football's national championship. But who did he play for? Alabama. That's right, the program that's undeniably the standard bearer for NCAA football in the last decade, but has a not-so-good record for producing professional quarterbacks. And that's being kind. Sure, there's Hall of Famers if you go back half a century, but as recently as 2015, it had been 28 years since a Crimson Tide alumnus won a single game as a starting quarterback in the NFL. 28 years. Now, this proud franchise has plucked a leader from the Deep South and given him the keys to the car. Who is Mac Jones, and what makes Bill Belichick and company believe he can carry the heavy mantle forward for the 6-time Super Bowl champs? Let's look back on this young man's life and career thus far and dig up their reasons for putting so much faith in Mac Jones. Michael McCorkle Jones was born in Jacksonville, Florida, to Gordon and Holly Jones, September 5th, 1998. Athletic genes run through the family, starting with Dad Gordon, who enjoyed a stellar collegiate tennis career and even had success for a time in the ATP Tour. Gordon played for Florida State for 3 years before transferring to Flagler College, where he was featured as the Sports Illustrated Athlete of the Week. His biggest claim to fame after graduation was a win over 1983 French Open champ and future International Tennis Hall of Famer Yannick Noah. Mom Holly also played tennis collegiately at Mercer. Sister Sarah Jane played tennis for the College of Charleston, and brother Will played soccer at his mom's alma mater, Mercer. It was likely inevitable that young Mac, coming from this family, found his way onto the athletic field as a youngster. In his Pop Warner days, the future star stood out in Jacksonville's Mandarin Athletic Association, especially with arm strength. Mac's team won city and regional championships, and his coach, Eric Yost, fondly remembers Mac as young as 7, stepping up in the pocket and making unbelievable throws. Yost today describes his former pupil as a park rat who spent free time playing freeze tag, chase, and hide and seek with neighborhood kids. Yost also recalls Mac's frustration with losing and intense desire to be the best. As early as 2nd grade, Mac Collins wrote on a worksheet that he wants to play in the NFL, but doesn't know for which team. In 5th grade, Mac demonstrated his desire for a career behind center when his teacher at the Bulls school gave the class an assignment to write a letter to their future self. Young Mac put down in neat cursive that he wanted to be a football quarterback. The letters were to be opened and read in the student's senior year, but by this time, he'd left school early to attend Alabama and participate in spring football. Mac's friends called him Little Corky, and only partly because of his middle name. If there's one constant about old school coaches, it's that no matter who you are, you must earn your playing time. And while Mac was on the varsity team as an 8th grader, he was only 5'5" and maybe 80 pounds, far too small to take the field on game nights. Now a massive 5'10" and 165 pounds as a sophomore, Mac got his first quarterback experience for Coach Rogers when the senior starter was injured. Rogers did not believe in headsets or signaling in plays, so Mac had to run to the sideline for the play call after each hit. And boy, did he get hit. See, Bulls ran the super old school wing T, an offense that went out of style with bell bottoms and disco balls. So the quarterback takes a pounding and rarely gets a chance to show off passing skills that others get in more modern systems. Still, under Jones' leadership, Bulls reached the Florida 4A state championship game. And while it did not end the way he wanted, Mac had done enough to garner attention from a few schools. College coaches early in his high school career, however, saw the same thing that he'd faced growing up, an obvious lack of size. But after climbing to 6'2" and still slender 180 pounds, heads began to turn. Now, as a somewhat heralded 4-star recruit, it was big news in Lexington when Mac committed early to play for the Kentucky Wildcats. That lasted more than 10 months, but as National Signing Day approached, one notable event changed his trajectory. Wildcat offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, who was Mac's primary recruiter and built a solid rapport with the young quarterback, was dismissed. Word was the offense in Lexington was moving towards a run-pass option style, not ideally suited to Jones' style of play. Meanwhile, Alabama head coach Nick Saban continued a lengthy back and forth with the senior, culminating a long process of phone calls and visits into a final decision to attend in Tuscaloosa. In April 2016, Jones received his scholarship offer from Coach Saban. Nearly 2 months later, after Mac appeared in the Elite 11 National Finals in California, word came to the Jones house in Florida that it was in his best interest to go to Alabama's football camp. So, Mom Holly and Mac took the family car from Jacksonville to Atlanta to pick up Dad Gordon, and the three rode through the night to reach Tuscaloosa. Mac says things clicked there and quickly announced his new commitment to the Crimson Tide on Twitter. In the heady world of being a freshman in Alabama, Mac had ample time to absorb his new surroundings as he was redshirted. With Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa already in pads, there was plenty of time for the weight room and film study, and for what coaches like to call game conditions. For a skinny kid who came to college unheralded, this time was golden. Even then, his Tide teammates saw firsthand his fire and competitiveness. Future Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith recalls Mac declaring even as the third-string scout team quarterback that he would try to embarrass you every day. Teammates are not. So, what do you do as a raw quarterback recruit on campus when you have spare time to get away from football and decompress? Coach a sorority intramural flag football team, of course. And did Mac take this opportunity to relax? Of course not. Former players recall seeing their scout team quarterback, intramural sorority coach, being ejected by a ref in the second half of a game. That Zeta Tau Alpha team won the intramural title. Back in the world of SEC football, being a redshirt freshman meant actually getting on the playing field for the Crimson Tide, but mostly as a holder for kicks. Mac's undisputed highlight of 2018 was etching his name in the record books when, late in the third quarter against Louisiana, the third stringer completed what became a 94-yard touchdown pass to freshman receiver Jalen Waddle. This tied the second longest scoring toss in the storied history of Alabama football. 2019 became a baptism of fire for young Mac Jones. Former starting quarterback Jalen Hurts announced in January his intentions to transfer as a graduate to Oklahoma for his final year of eligibility. This still left Heisman hopeful Tua Tagovailoa firmly in the starting role, but pushed Jones, now a redshirt sophomore, into the backup slot. On October 19th against Tennessee in the Tide's seventh game, Tagovailoa suffered a high ankle sprain early in the second quarter and did not return. Just like that, Jones had to buckle his helmet and take the field for the first time at Alabama in a pressure situation. Mac held his own, completed 6 of his 11 attempts for 72 yards in the eventual 35-13 Tide victory. Tua underwent ankle surgery the next day, and there was no doubt who the spotlight was on the following week as Arkansas came to town. In his first collegiate start, all Jones did was throw for 235 yards and 4 touchdowns. Almost all his production came in the first 2 quarters, and the Tide led 41-0 at halftime on the way to a blowout win over the Hogs. Tua courageously came back after 3 weeks as the Tide suffered their first loss, 46-41 to eventual national champion LSU, but the season took an even more tumultuous turn. On November 16th at Mississippi State, Tagovailoa was seriously injured late in the first half on a sack. A broken nose and concussion were secondary in the severity to the hip dislocation that also fractured the posterior wall, and the college football world watched stunned as Tua was carted off and flown to a Birmingham hospital. Season over for the Heisman hopeful, and a whole new scenario for the kid from Jacksonville. As Jones liked to say, he and his teammates around him played football since they were 5 years old. Nothing new, nothing different. Yet there's no denying that now it was a very new, very different level of pressure and spotlight. FCS opponent Western Carolina offered little resistance in the first post-Tua matchup for Bama, and Mac threw for 275 yards and 3 scores in just over a half of work. That would not be the case the following week in the Iron Bowl at Auburn. Mac's performance at Jordan-Hare Stadium was a combination of great plays and 2 mistakes that ultimately did the Tide in. On the positive side, Jones threw the ball all over the field in what became a shootout with the Tigers, passing for 4 scores and 335 yards. But 2 pick sixes, one 100-yarder in the third quarter as Alabama was seemingly about to score, could not be overcome in the 48-45 loss. Coach Saban had high praise for his young backup in the aftermath, especially the fact that Jones brought his team back in the fourth quarter to retake the lead before ultimately coming up short. There would be no college football playoff berth in 2019, only a victory over Michigan in the Citrus Bowl in which Jones threw for 3 touchdowns and 327 yards. Everyone remembers 2020 for so many reasons, and most of them are not good. But for Alabama football and Mac Jones, what the team and their now starting quarterback could control turned into something special that will be remembered fondly as long as football is being played on Saturdays. And for the first time, there was not a Heisman hopeful taking snaps in front of Mac. This team was clearly his to lead, and lead he did. First, however, would the season even be played? COVID-19 caused havoc worldwide, and college football had no immunity to the upheaval. On July 30th, the Southeastern Conference announced that non-conference matchups were canceled, and each team now had a slate of 10 conference foes. Finally, with very limited numbers of fans in attendance, the season kicked off for Bama on September 26th at Missouri. Mac threw for almost 250 yards and 2 scores, but he was just getting warmed up. Jones topped the 400-yard passing mark the next 2 weeks in a blowout of number 13 Texas A&M and shootout win over Ole Miss. The first true test came on October 17th when third-ranked Georgia came to Tuscaloosa to face number 2 Alabama. A slugfest first half saw the home team down 4 at intermission, but Jones and the Crimson Tide fired out of the locker room and rolled up to a 17-point win. More than any other moment, the final 2 quarters were Mac Jones' debut as a top-tier quarterback, Heisman candidate, and NFL prospect. Mac threw for 417 yards and 4 touchdowns in the comeback win over the Dogs, and even more impressively, led the offense to over 550 yards and 33 first downs against a top 5 unit. And now for that little spring frenzy called the NFL Draft. Some prognosticators had Jones going as high as 3 overall to San Francisco. But Mac had to wait until 4 other quarterbacks were off the board to be selected at 15 by the New England Patriots. And in the words of the skinny kid from Jacksonville on his draft day, "This is what I wanted all along."